A black waiter helps a drunken billionaire get home. She turns him into the owner of a Japanese restaurant. The woman fell off the bar stool like a sack of potatoes. Her 3-0 Italian designer dress was now soaked with premium sake that had spilled all over it. It was 2:30 a.m. at Sakura Palace, and Devon Thompson knew his shift should have ended an hour ago, but he was still there, watching one of Manhattan's wealthiest clients stagger dangerously close to the marble steps. "Ma'am, let me help you," Devon said, approaching her cautiously. At 26, he had learned that drunk, wealthy women could be unpredictable, especially when a black man offered assistance. 3 years working at this place had taught him that kindness was sometimes mistaken for opportunism. "I don't need charity," she mumbled, trying to lean against the authentic Japanese cherrywood wall. Her platinum blonde hair was a mess, makeup smeared. But even in that state, no one could fail to recognize Elizabeth Whitmore, heiress to the hotel empire that ruled the East Coast. Devon hesitated. In recent months, he'd noticed something strange in the way some staff behaved when Elizabeth appeared. Whispers fell silent. Eyes looked anxious. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, especially from the manager Langston and his crew from the corporate office. "Listen, let me call a taxi for you, all right? It's not safe for you to be out here alone." Elizabeth tried to focus on him, blinking repeatedly. You're not like the others," she said, leaning fully on his arm. "Why are you being kind to me? Everyone else just wants something." The question surprised Devon. In truth, he wasn't sure himself. Maybe it was because he'd grown up watching his mother work 16-hour days as a janitor to raise 3 kids and knew what it felt like to be alone and vulnerable. Or maybe it was because, in recent months, he'd come to realize that not everything at Sakura Palace was as it seemed. As they waited for the Uber on the empty sidewalk, Elizabeth mumbled something about genuine people and second chances. Devon assumed it was just the alcohol talking, but he still memorized the address she gave him, a penthouse on the Upper East Side worth more than his entire life. What he didn't know was that the restaurant security cameras had recorded every second of that conversation. The next day, Devon arrived at work, expecting a normal shift at Sakura Palace. He had no idea that his kind gesture the night before had been observed by someone far more sober than Elizabeth. And that very kindness was about to be used against him in a way he could never have imagined. Head chef Hiroshi Tanaka greeted him with a strange look. "Devon, I need to speak with you in the office. Right now." His tone was different, tense, laced with an urgency Devon rarely heard from him. Devon's heart pounded. After 3 years working here, he knew that being called to the office rarely meant anything good for employees like him, especially when Regional Director Henry Langston was already inside, leaning against the desk with a smile that spelled trouble. Langston was the kind of man who wielded racism as a subtle weapon, always careful never to say anything too explicit, but making his intentions perfectly clear through professional standards and internal policies. Devon had learned early on how to read those unspoken messages. "Have a seat," Langston said, flipping through a folder with deliberately slow movements. "I've received a few complaints about your behavior toward a guest. It seems you may have overstepped some boundaries." Devon frowned. "What boundaries?" "Harassing an intoxicated guest, providing unauthorized services outside your scheduled shift." Langston paused dramatically, enunciating each word. "Some people believe you are trying to take advantage of a vulnerable situation, especially with a high-profile guest like Mrs. Whitmore." The accusation hit Devon like a punch to the gut. He knew exactly which night Langston was referring to, but hearing the twisted version of events left him stunned. It was as if his act of kindness had been distorted into something filthy and predatory. "I was just helping a guest get home safely," Devon said, keeping his voice steady despite the anger boiling beneath the surface. "Anyone would have done the same." Langston gave a cold smile and opened his briefcase, revealing printed photographs from the security cameras. "Of course, that's what happened. The problem is, we can't afford to have employees like you if it leaves room for these kinds of misunderstandings. Our clients have certain expectations about discretion and appropriate boundaries." The heavy silence that followed said it all. Devon understood that no matter how many compliments he received from customers, no matter how flawless his work record was, to Langston, he would always be a potential problem, just a black man who'd forgotten his place. "So what are you saying?" Devon asked, though he already knew the answer. "I'm saying you might want to consider other career opportunities somewhere more in line with your background." But what neither of them could have expected was that, at that very moment, across the city, Elizabeth Whitmore was having a very different conversation with her lawyer, a conversation that would not only change Devon's life, but also expose the dark secrets hidden within Sakura Palace for years. The truth was, Elizabeth had been far more sober that night than most people assumed. And what she had uncovered about Langston and his methods of hiring was about to erupt in a way no one at Sakura Palace would ever forget. The resignation notice came the following Friday, wrapped in administrative language and delivered by a nervous intern who couldn't even look Devon in the eye. The official reason was operational cost reduction, but everyone knew the truth. Langston had gotten exactly what he wanted. Devon carefully folded the uniform he had worn for the past 3 years and placed it in the locker one last time. His co-workers watched in awkward silence, some genuinely sympathetic, others quietly relieved it wasn't them. Hiroshi approached and discreetly slipped an envelope into Devon's hand. "Your tips from the last 6 months," the Japanese head chef whispered. "I kept them aside. They belong to you." Walking home through the October drizzle, Devon called his mother. Rosa Thompson was on a night shift cleaning an office building on Wall Street, but she always answered when her son called. "I lost my job," he said plainly. Rosa had taught her children that bad news didn't get better when sugar-coated. "Did you do something wrong?" "No, I did the right thing." There was a pause. Rosa knew her son well enough to understand that behind that answer was a much bigger story. "Come home. We'll talk." The 2-bedroom apartment in Queens where Devon had grown up still carried the familiar scent of bleach and strong coffee, just like always. Rosa arrived home at 6 a.m., still in her janitor's uniform, and found her son sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. "What's all this?" she asked, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "I'm trying to make sense of what happened at work," Devon replied, showing her the notes he'd written. "Remember when you told me about that supervisor at Goldman Sachs? The one who always assigned you the toughest floors?" Rosa nodded bitterly. "Thompson, 20 years of cleaning offices, I never had trouble with anyone but with him. There was always something. The only difference was I didn't bow my head the way he wanted." "Exactly. Langston did the same to me, just more subtle." Devon told her about Elizabeth, about the fabricated accusation, and about the pattern he had started to notice in recent months. Black and Latino employees being reassigned or fired for minor mistakes that white employees got away with. "My son," Rosa said, placing her hand over his, "sometimes life puts us in a position where we have to choose between accepting injustice or standing up to it. You already know what I would always choose." Devon smiled for the first time in days. Rosa Thompson had raised 3 children on her own after her husband died in a work accident. She had faced discriminatory supervisors, condescending wealthy women, and an entire system constantly trying to remind her of her place, and not once had she ever bowed her head. She asked, "So, what will you do?" "I don't know yet," he said, "but I'm not going to pretend nothing happened." On Monday morning, Devon returned to Sakura Palace, this time as a customer. He asked for a table in the corner and observed things he had never fully noticed while working there. Langston floated around the main dining room like a king inspecting his kingdom, stopping to whisper with important white patrons while completely ignoring the tables where people of color sat. And then, Devon noticed something interesting. Elizabeth Whitmore entered alone, requesting a discreet seat at the bar. Langston nearly rushed to greet her, smiling warmly and bowing. But Elizabeth quickly brushed him off, choosing instead to sit quietly and observe the restaurant. Devon realized she was doing exactly what he was, watching, taking mental notes, paying attention to the details others overlooked. When their eyes met for a brief moment, she gave a subtle nod, almost imperceptible. That evening, Devon received a message from an unknown number. Coffee, 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Corner Deli, 72nd and Columbus. We have a lot to talk about. V. He tossed and turned all night. 3 years working there had taught him that people like Elizabeth Whitmore didn't reach out to people like him without a very specific reason. And given that Langston had used her name to justify the firing, Devon knew that reason was going to be very interesting. In his desk drawer, he kept a small notebook where he had documented every odd detail about Sakura Palace over the past few months. Dates, times, strange conversations, customers who received unusual treatment for unclear reasons. He hadn't known exactly why he was keeping track of it all, only that something in his gut told him it might matter someday. Now, looking at the neatly written pages, Devon began to understand. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence that Langston had been so quick to push him out. People who notice the details become a problem when someone has something to hide. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside Devon that Langston could never see: a quiet resolve, growing under pressure like a diamond forming deep beneath the earth. What that privileged man didn't realize was that every act of contempt was writing the terms of his own downfall, and that Devon Thompson was not the kind of man who easily forgot or forgave injustice. There was a time when, as he lowered his head in the face of veiled insults in the office, Langston believed he had been broken. But those who understand true strength know it grows in silence, fueled by the righteous anger of people who know they deserve more than what they've been given. Corner Deli on 72nd Street was exactly the kind of place millionaires rarely set foot, in worn-out tables and chairs, coffee served in thick ceramic mugs, and the smell of fried bacon heavy in the air. Devon arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table, still not entirely convinced that Elizabeth Whitmore actually wanted to meet him. She arrived at exactly 9:00, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, probably still worth more than a month of Devon's salary at Sakura Palace. Gone were the elaborate makeup and perfectly styled hair from that night at the restaurant. She looked surprisingly ordinary until she opened her mouth. "You got fired because of me," she said bluntly, sitting down across from him. "Langston said you filed a harassment complaint." Devon nodded. "That's what he told me." "Lies." Elizabeth pulled out her phone and held it out for him to see the screen. "This is the only exchange I've had with Sakura Palace since that night. An email thanking the staff for excellent support and requesting that praise be passed on to the employee who helped her." Devon read the message twice. The date, the time, everything matched. Langston had completely fabricated the accusation. "Why are you showing me this?" Elizabeth gave a faint smile, but there was nothing humorous about it. "Because my company holds a major stake in the investment group funding Sakura Palace's expansion. And because, for the past 6 months, I've been investigating a very interesting pattern of racial discrimination in their hiring and firing practices." Devon felt something shift in his chest. "You knew I was going to be fired?" "I suspected it. Langston has a pattern. 3 black employees fired in the past year, all for minor infractions that white employees weren't penalized for. 1 Latino waiter reassigned to the kitchen right after receiving several compliments from guests. You were next." She opened a folder and slid the stack of documents toward him: employment contracts, performance reviews, customer complaint reports. Devon recognized a few names, former co-workers who had disappeared without much explanation. Langston is systematically building a front-of-house staff that's entirely white. He keeps a few Latino workers in the kitchen to avoid making it too obvious, but any black employee in a visible role has been gradually removed. Devon flipped through the stack of papers. "Where did you get all this?" "I'm an investor. I have access to HR reports." Elizabeth paused for a beat. "And I have personal reasons for wanting to see Langston held accountable." For the next hour, Elizabeth told her own story: how Langston had repeatedly dismissed her proposals for diversity programs, how he spoke in a condescending tone about the right kind of clientele and restaurant standards whenever she brought up inclusion, how she eventually discovered that he was using his authority not just to filter out employees, but even customers who didn't fit his personal vision. "That night you helped me," Elizabeth continued. I wasn't actually drunk. I was testing how the staff would respond to a vulnerable guest. Langston saw me walk in and disappeared straight into his office. You were the only one who offered to help. Devon leaned back in his chair, trying to process everything. So it was all staged? The situation was yes, but your reaction wasn't. You genuinely cared about a stranger in trouble. That was enough for me to know what kind of person you are. Elizabeth opened her laptop and showed him a detailed presentation, hiring charts by ethnicity, retention statistics, promotion patterns. The case against Langston was laid out with mathematical precision. I'm preparing a lawsuit against Langston for systemic discrimination. I need employees willing to testify. Devon looked at the data, then at Elizabeth. You think I can convince people to take that kind of risk? They have families to worry about. That's exactly why I need you as the coordinator. You know who can be trusted. Elizabeth closed the laptop. And one more thing. I'm offering you the position of manager at a new Japanese restaurant my company's opening in Harlem. Co-ownership, profit sharing with the staff, clear diversity policy. Devon stayed silent for a long time. It was all too good to be true and yet bitterly logical. Elizabeth Whitmore wasn't doing charity. She was making a smart business move. What's the real reason? He finally asked. Elizabeth smiled this time with genuine admiration. Langston underestimated me because I'm a woman and young. He underestimated you because you're black and just a lowly waiter. People like him keep making the same arrogant mistake over and over again. Devon thought about his mother, about the stacked up bills, about the years of swallowing big and small indignities at Sakura Palace. He thought about the coworkers who quietly disappeared, the veiled jokes, the condescending looks. If I do this, Devon said slowly, it won't just be about getting a new job. It'll be about making Langston answer for everything he's done. Elizabeth extended her hand. Exactly why I chose you. That afternoon, Devon called 3 former coworkers from Sakura Palace. 2 agreed to meet and discuss. The third, Marcus, was still working in the kitchen and willing to secretly document the ongoing discriminatory behavior. Over the next 2 weeks, Devon became something Langston never saw coming, a meticulous, strategic organizer. He gathered testimonies, recorded calls legally, photographed documents Marcus was able to discreetly access. Each new piece of evidence further exposed the systemic nature of the discrimination. Langston wasn't just a casual bigot, he was a deliberate architect, using his power to shape Sakura Palace into his own vision of superiority. Meanwhile, Langston carried on with his usual routines, completely unaware that every insult, every discriminatory decision was now being carefully documented. His arrogance, which had made him believe he was untouchable, had now become his greatest weakness. In one moment, as Langston smiled in satisfaction after reassigning another Latino employee to an out-of-sight position, he believed he had perfected his little kingdom of privilege. But those who understand the true power of justice know it grows in silence, fed by the patience of people who understand that the sweetest revenge is the kind the enemy never sees coming. The meeting was scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. at Sakura Palace's corporate office. Langston arrived full of confidence, believing it was just another routine discussion about operational efficiency with the investors. He had no idea that Devon was upstairs, seated in a separate conference room, watching everything unfold through a live video feed. Elizabeth entered the room, accompanied by 2 lawyers and a representative from the company's ethics committee. Langston greeted everyone with his usual fake smile, adjusting his expensive tie as if he were about to receive an award. Mr. Langston, Elizabeth began, opening a thick file folder. We need to discuss the hiring and firing standards that have recently come to light. Langston scoffed. Of course, we're always ready to optimize. I trust you've seen how I've upheld the restaurant's excellent standards by removing the so-called problematic elements. The first lawyer turned on the projector. A detailed chart appeared showing termination patterns over the past 18 months. 100% of black employees in the service department had been fired. 80% of Latino staff had been reassigned to lower visibility roles. Not a single white employee had been dismissed for similar infractions. Langston's smile faltered for a moment. These numbers? Just statistical coincidence. Mere coincidence. Elizabeth pressed the remote. The next screen displayed audio transcript excerpts. Langston speaking about the right kind of customers and restaurant standards. Langston instructing supervisors to find pretexts to discipline certain employees. Langston bragging about cleaning house. Langston's face went pale. How did you get this? This is illegal recording. The second lawyer responded calmly, perfectly legal. All recordings were made with the consent of at least one participating party. Elizabeth continued the presentation. Internal emails, photos of HR documents, signed testimonies from former employees, and finally, the knockout blow. A video clip showing Langston alone in his office, popping champagne to celebrate Devon's dismissal, saying, "One more problem taken care of." Who recorded this? Langston stammered, his hands trembling. "Someone you completely underestimated," Elizabeth replied. "Someone who worked here for 3 years, watching, documenting, recording every one of your racially discriminatory decisions." The door to the room swung open. Devon stepped in, carrying a box full of documents. Langston looked at him as if he'd seen a ghost. "You," Langston whispered. "No, impossible. You were just a black waiter I thought would be easy to get rid of." Devon cut him off, setting the box down on the table. "That's right. That's all I was, until you taught me that people like me have to be twice as smart as people like you just to survive." He opened the box and pulled out months of meticulous documentation, every recorded conversation, every backed-up email, every witness ready to testify to Langston's actions. "You built a pattern of discrimination so blatant, even a blind jury could see it." Langston sprang to his feet, trying to reclaim a shred of control. "This is a setup. You people have nothing. I've got backing, I have connections." Elizabeth gave a cold smile. "You had connections, past tense, because," she glanced at her watch, "in about 15 minutes, this meeting will be broadcast live to the local press. In 30 minutes, every employee at Sakura Palace will receive a full copy of this file. And within the hour, the company board will vote to terminate you for gross misconduct." Langston's face turned bright red, sweat beading on his forehead. "You can't do this to me. I built this place. I upheld the standards." "The standards you upheld," Devon said, his voice calm but firm, "were standards of hatred, exclusion, and abuse of power. You didn't build anything. You tore down people who were better than you in every way." Elizabeth stood up. "Mr. Langston, you are terminated for systemic discrimination, creating a hostile work environment, and violating the company's diversity and inclusion policies. All benefits are revoked. Your reference file will include a full report of your conduct, and you will be facing individual legal action." Langston staggered, gripping the table tightly. "You're ruining my life. 20 years of my career." "No," Devon said, locking eyes with the man who had once humiliated him. "You ruined your own life the moment you believed the color of your skin gave you the right to degrade others. I just documented the choices you made." As security escorted Langston out, Devon remained still, gazing through the glass window. Elizabeth stepped closer. "How do you feel?" Devon took a deep breath. "Not triumphant. Free like I can finally breathe without being judged just for existing." Outside, Langston desperately dialed his old connections only to find the news of his termination had already spread across the industry. The reputation he had built on the rotten foundations of prejudice and privilege was now collapsing before his very eyes. Elizabeth looked at Devon with genuine admiration. "You know, you could have just taken the job I offered and walked away from all this, but you didn't." Devon smiled for the first time in weeks. "My mother used to tell me that when you have the power to change something and choose not to, that's still a choice. I chose to act." 6 months later, Devon stood in what used to be an abandoned warehouse in Harlem, watching as the design team transformed it into something Langston would never have dared to imagine. Kibo, the Japanese word for hope, would not just be a Japanese restaurant. It would be a declaration. Elizabeth had kept her promise even more generously than expected. Devon wasn't just the manager. He was a co-owner with 30% equity and full authority over hiring and staff training. More importantly, every employee would receive a share of the profits, a near-revolutionary concept in the restaurant industry. "How many of the old Sakura Palace staff have you brought back?" Elizabeth asked, scanning the hiring list. "Everyone who wanted to return," Devon replied with a smile. "And a few Langston fired years ago. Jenny's going to be head of service. Marcus is running the kitchen. Hiroshi agreed to come on as cultural advisor." The irony was almost sweet. Langston had spent years proudly maintaining standards by pushing out talented people simply because of their skin color. And now, those very people were building something that would render Sakura Palace a relic of a shameful past. Devon's phone rang. It was his mother, calling from work. "Son, I just read that article about you in the paper. Are you sure this isn't a dream?" Devon laughed. The article had gone live that very morning. Former waiter, once targeted by discrimination, opens revolutionary restaurant in Harlem. The photo showed Devon with his multiracial team, all beaming a stark contrast to the tense, hierarchical atmosphere Langston had once enforced. "It's real, Mom, and it's more than that. Remember when we used to talk about dignity at work? Now I'm building jobs where people are respected from day one." At the same time, across the city, Langston was facing a bitter reality. The class action lawsuit filed by Devon and his former colleagues had escalated into a federal case alleging systemic racial discrimination. His once powerful connections had vanished overnight. The man who once believed himself untouchable now couldn't even land an interview for a basic managerial role. No one wanted to hire him. On Kibo's opening day, Devon looked around the packed dining room, and for the first time in years, he felt true pride. Not the hollow kind built on stepping over others like Langston's, but the kind that comes from creating something larger than yourself. Kibo was an instant success, fully booked for 2 months straight. Critics praised not only the exceptional food, but the warm, respectful atmosphere Devon had cultivated. The staff smiled with genuine joy. Customers, regardless of appearance or background, felt welcomed, truly seen and valued. Marcus Now, the executive chef, came up to Devon during the dinner rush. "Table 12 wants to thank you personally. They said they've never been treated this kindly at a restaurant." Devon made his way to the table. An elderly couple greeted him with warm smiles. "We just wanted to thank you," the woman said. "It's been a long time since we've truly felt welcome in a place like this." It was moments like these that reminded Devon why he had fought so hard, not for revenge, but to build spaces where no one would ever have to feel the way he once did at Sakura Palace. 1 year after leaving his old job, Devon sat in his office at Kibo, reviewing a proposal to open a second location in Brooklyn. His mother had retired. Devon had insisted on covering all her expenses so she could finally rest. The staff had become a real family, one built on trust, dignity, and shared purpose. And Langston? The last Devon had heard, he was working as an assistant manager for a fast food chain in the suburbs. Ironic, really, the man who once looked down on people like Devon was now surviving thanks to the mercy of employers willing to give someone a second chance. Devon gazed out the window, watching the flow of people of all colors and backgrounds passing along the Harlem sidewalk. Many paused to read Kibo's menu, their eyes filled with curiosity and delight. This vibrant community that Langston once tried to erase was now the very foundation of Devon's success. The best revenge hadn't been destroying Langston, but building something so good, so undeniable, that everything Langston had once stood for now seemed outdated and irrelevant. While Langston faded into bitterness and obscurity, Devon rose by creating opportunity and changing lives. Langston had tried to bring him down for the color of his skin, but in the end, all he had done was reveal his own emptiness. And Devon understood. True victory isn't about dragging your oppressor down. It's about rising to a glory they never imagined you could reach. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought themselves superior, then you know success is the most powerful answer of all.